Welcome, everyone, to this latest Forensic Focus webinar. As always, my name is Jamie Morris, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Josh Brunty, Assistant Professor of Digital Forensics at Marshall University in West Virginia. Josh is going to be giving us today a first look from a forensic perspective at Windows 8. Now, as far as I'm aware, the official release date of Windows 8 is currently towards the back end of October. So, although developers, IT professionals, Microsoft partners, and so on will already have had their hands on the final product by the time this presentation goes out, we, as the forensic community, have probably got around 2 months or so to try to get up to speed with Windows 8 before it goes on sale to the general public. I'm sure this presentation will help us do that, and I'm very grateful to Josh for agreeing to come on today and share the results of his research with us. Just one last thing before we begin. We're taking a slightly different approach this month to questions and answers. There's not going to be a live Q&A during the presentation itself. So if you do see the Ask a Question button on your screen, please just ignore it. What we're going to do instead is move to the Forensic Focus forums once the presentation is finished. And there will be a thread in the new webinars forum which we can use for discussion. And Josh will be around immediately after the presentation to answer any questions. It's not quite as immediate as running a live Q&A during the webinar, but I think it's probably a better way of both extending and archiving the conversation once the presentation's over. Okay, without any further ado from me then, Josh, if you're still on the line, I'll hand over to you right now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie. Once again, I'm Josh Brunty, Assistant Professor of Digital Forensics here at Marshall. And much thanks to Jamie for letting us come on and share our research here that we're doing here at the university. A very exciting time for us in regards to what we're doing here. Wonderful support from the university to allow us to do this. And one of the things that we do here is we try to at least share the information that our students come up with, that we come up with, and you know, disseminate that to the e-discovery and law enforcement communities, because this is an extremely big change from you know, previous versions of Windows. This is relatively new. You know, there's some changes here, some changes that will go away. But I really do hope that you take something away from this, and you know, of course, as Jamie mentioned, you know, we'll definitely be happy to answer your questions. So a few things that we'll talk about during this webinar today is, of course, an operating system overview of what Windows 8 is all about. What we're calling the Metro interface, from my understanding, changed when it's just changing the nomenclature a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the whole Metro interface is a big change, not only on the front end of what we're viewing, but also what we're going to be examining as well. We're looking at a very networked operating system now than what we were used to in previous versions. So we'll talk a little bit of how the OS interacts with external accounts, such as Facebook and Twitter, and some of the other sharing sites that are commonly available on the internet now. I'll mention a little bit of file structure and show you what some of the stuff looks like in FTK. There's some screenshots in this presentation, and talk a little bit about the forensic artifacts that we can gather from Windows 8 as a whole. One of the newest things that's coming out to the immersive browser artifacts, and of course any operating system presentation would not be complete without some discussion of registry artifacts. I hate to break it to everyone, but Windows and Microsoft in general is keeping the registry around, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. So we'll speak a little bit about the changes in the registry that are coming down the pipe. Also, we'll spend a little bit of time, and this is something that I would like to gather some discussion on the message board as well, of this resilient file system, which is supposed to be kind of the replacement to the NTFS file system, and I guess you could throw that in the mix as well, but primarily made for as a replacement to NTFS. So I'd like to get a little bit of discussion started on that, because that's going to be a big change for us as examiners of how we're going to encounter that. So to give a quick overview about Windows 8, it's of course the newest operating system in Microsoft's line of OSs. It's set to release in late 2012. As of Sunday, I believe, they just released their RTM, the release to manufacture version. There were 2 previous versions prior to that. Now the version that I'm working off of was the release candidate 1, basically. So this is actually one build behind. This is the version that came out, I believe it was June 5th. So we're already behind. You know, this is kind of, I wouldn't say stale information, but you know, we're also one build behind. The newest release is due out in October of 2012, specifically October 26th. So once that is released, we'll probably dissect that version of the OS because we're pretty static on what artifacts are going to be there, and maybe keep this discussion going of what is changing in this. So, but the big thing is we're looking at a new Metro-style interface, which Windows is terming as modern now rather than Metro. They're claiming that Metro was the code name. So, you know, what they're saying is Metro-style now is going to be modern in October. So, and it was designed primarily for touchscreen, mouse, keyboard, and pen input. So it looks a lot like the current Windows mobile version that is out right now. I'm going to shoot up a screenshot of Windows 8 as it currently looks, and as you can see, it's a little bit different from previous versions, Windows XP, Vista, and 7. You're looking at more of a tiled interface. So it's basically, you can see that they're gearing this more towards the tablet PC or the touch PC market. To me, it looks like they're trying to merge the mobile market together with the PC market, and eventually try to make one, I guess, unified operating system, or at least it looks like that to me. As you can see, there's various tiles on there. You can see up there at the top in the center is a photos tile, there's a people tile, a messaging tile. We'll talk a little bit in detail about what these tiles actually are and the artifacts that are located within these tiles in general. It is a little bit different than what we've seen in Windows 7. So this version of Windows, even though the release to manufacture is free for download, I would strongly recommend picking this up from MSD and Microsoft and play around with it a little bit, just even for your own curiosity to get a feel of what Windows 8 is going to be like, because you know, of course, we're going to be moving into it soon. So, you know, as examiners and as standard users, it's probably good to pick that up and you know, get used to it, at least from a certain perspective. Now, one of the things that I'll bring up here, a lot of this stuff a lot of the artifacts that I'll be bringing up here shortly is coming out of what I call the local folder. If you remember in Windows 7, they brought in, and even in Windows Vista and XP, there was that local and roaming profiles that were available, and each of them had their certain forensic artifacts. Most of the stuff that we'll be talking about for the sake of this presentation comes out of the local folder, and of course there's a screenshot there from FTK, and you know, it's not a really big change from Windows 7. It's just we have some different folders within that local profile that we haven't seen in previous versions of Windows, specifically Windows 7. So one of the things that they really changed in Windows 7, or at least in Windows 8, I'm sorry, that wasn't prevalent in Windows 7 was the inclusion of Metro apps. And those Metro apps are displayed on the Metro desktop. So I was referring to those tiles. Each of those tiles, in a sense, is its own Metro app. So thinking about maybe not so much as a program or an installed program on a PC, but think of it more, let's go into the world of Apple and Android, where you're adding apps into the operating system. They're not considered programs, they're applications. That's what Windows is trying to do in Windows 8. They're trying to coined that terminology that these programs that we're installing are essentially apps. So each app has its own tile, which is essentially nothing more than a link file that's associated with them, and it'll display who created that app and the app's location. Now, this data is basically located in plain text under the hood of the operating system. And for the sake of time, we're not really going to dive that deep into where a lot of stuff is located, but just kind of hit the highlights of what we're seeing. Now, one of the things, and you can see that in red text here, that what we call is the Immersive app, which is the Metro app, has its own registry file. So what I'm saying there is, you're looking at programs in Windows 7 and Windows XP. They basically generated their own registry settings. They had their own stuff inside of the registry. Now, consider this, that the Metro apps, in a sense, kind of has its own embedded registry in each application. So as we move on this presentation, you'll kind of get a better understanding of what I'm trying to tell you here. I know that to some of you that may be that's kind of foreign. You're probably lost there. I'll promise I'll try to clear that up. I'm not the best with words, so we'll just kind of move along here and kind of see what we're looking at. Now, when I talked about the link files in general, going back to the tiles themselves, there are application shortcuts that are in there. And I have a screenshot from FTK that kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at. So if you remember going back to the screenshot of Windows 8, you saw some of these tiles look familiar to you. You probably saw right in the center there, the Pinball FX2 tile that was located there. So notice that these are pretty much, they look a lot like the .lmk files that we previously saw when we created shortcuts on the desktop. It's just pretty much the same thing. We have application shortcuts that are being created for each one of these tiles that are being generated on the home screen in Windows. So kind of a change there from previous versions of what we're seeing, but pretty much the same premise in general. So let's go into and dive a little bit into the Metro application artifacts. When I mean Metro app is each one of those tiles that we install. So a majority of these apps in Windows 8 are connected to the internet with a Windows Live, what we call a Microsoft account. I use Windows Live because that's what it was currently called, but Microsoft is coining that to be called Microsoft account now. And each of these apps is pretty much considered to be what Windows calls an immersive environment. So when we term the coin immersive, it's when we're clicking on that tile, we're bringing it up, we're having multiple apps open at once. It's what we call the immersive environment. And what we mean by immersive is within each app you can access other apps. So Microsoft says that in a sense that app becomes the operating system. And that's a little bit different than having a program running on top of the operating system. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make that app kind of the front page news that you're looking at for that specific time. Going back, and this is really almost an Apple thing, whenever you open up an app, you notice that the app is kind of the front page of it. You don't really shut down that app. You're minimizing that app, you're putting that app in the background, and you're accessing another app without closing that original app. And that's what Microsoft's doing here. Well, because of this immersive concept, because we're trying to keep multiple programs open at once, each of these applications are going to have its own internet artifacts. So that is interesting in itself, and that's the reason I put it in red. This is going to be extremely helpful to us. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the sake when the final release version comes out in October. I don't see how it could not be. So that's why I'm including it, at least in this presentation, of saying that this has its own internet artifacts. So 3 specific locations that we want to talk about here where these Metro apps are located. We have the cache, cookies, and history. Now, this is legacy from previous versions of Windows. If you look in Internet Explorer, there's 3 places that you're looking: cache, cookies, and history. This is a little bit different. Each Metro app, regardless if it's the Microsoft Xbox Companion or Internet Explorer or a weather app from the Weather Channel, it's going to have this cache cookies and history because it's considered immersive in general. Now notice that I've included the path there for you that says, I just included Metro app name. So, that general Metro app name is going to be whatever Metro app, title that's going to be. Right now it's located in a subfolder called AC, and there's 3 specific locations. That very top one is INET cache, and you can see on the second one there's an INET cookies and an INET history. Now the INET cache, of course, that's the web cache that's specific to that specific Metro app. So if we're looking for weather, say in specific Huntington, West Virginia, that cache is going to cache that data that I included, or at least looked up the weather in Huntington, West Virginia. There's also cookie files that are specific to that Metro app. And that data right now is contained in a text file, almost like a Metro app web history kind of deal. And then you're looking at Metro app history, which is the INET history folder. And that is pretty much history files that are specific to the Metro app, and the format of data is consistent with previous versions. So you're almost seeing what you saw in IE 7 and 8 in versions of Windows 7, except you're looking at it for the specific application. So a little bit different there, a little bit different direction that Windows is taking with Windows 8 in that regard. Now, here's another one to take into consideration, and I don't know if this is going to be in the October release version of Windows 8, but right now we're dealing with 2 separate versions of Internet Explorer 10. Right now we have the Immersive, which is the tile version that you have, and in the release versions of Windows, and I don't know if this is the case for the newest one, this is something we'll probably bring up on the discussion boards, is did the desktop interface stick around? And one of the things is, right now we have 2 separate versions of Windows. You have the legacy desktop version that was included, or you can jump over to this, immersive, that I included the screenshot earlier. So right now there's 2 separate versions of IE10 in a sense, the immersive and the desktop. And I've included the artifacts from that browser for both the immersive, which is the first one listed, and the desktop IE, so where that history is located. So that's the websites the user visited while browsing with IE10. Now there's also tiles that you can pin as favorites as well. So if I were to bookmark forensicfocus.com as a favorite tile, those roaming tiles would show up there, that I pin that as a tile for within that folder there. So that seems to show up for both the desktop and the immersive. So you have 2 separate versions that are kind of like, I guess, swapping artifacts in a sense. So I don't know if this is going to stick around in later versions of IE. I just don't know. It's kind of wonky. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why Microsoft will continue on with this kind of setup, but of course that's what we're looking at now. One of the big things that changed in Windows 8, of course, and we'll talk about it a little bit in detail, is the communication app. And that is, when we're coining communication app, that is essentially the user's email, the chat clients, Facebook, other social networking sites like Twitter, pretty much anything that allows the user to interact with another person, Microsoft is throwing into the communication apps. My sneaky suspicion, and everything that I've read, when the final version of this is released, they'll probably lump all this into an app called People. I don't know how that exactly is going to look, but from everything I'm reading, communication app is probably going to become what we call People. So I really don't know at this point, but from every indication, this is what it is right now. You can see if I go into the People app right now, this is our Marshall Digital Forensics. This is a Twitter page that we have set up. And you can see that this is kind of lumping in Twitter. It's lumping in Facebook updates. I can, basically follow Facebook status updates, Twitter status updates, friends that I'm following. Everything's being lumped into here. Now, the good thing about this is all this Facebook stuff is being, it's almost like an RSS feed. It's feeding in, it's posting, but as it posts, it also caches. Now, go back to previous to what we talked about. Not only does the IE or Xbox Companions, have cache artifacts, the People app also has cache artifacts. So, the things that made it so hard to view Facebook artifacts before may make it a little bit easier for us to find these artifacts in the cache history that's in Windows 8. So that's a good thing for us. We're able to pull back Twitter messages that we would have to go the search warrant route before, or Facebook messages and communication that we would have to go through the legal channels before is now being cached upon that computer. So in some cases this may save a little additional legwork on the law enforcement end or even the e-discovery end about the way or the methodology that Microsoft is using in the People application. So very interesting. And you can see here too, these are Twitter and Facebook contacts that have been added. What we did is we had some fake Facebook profiles, we had a fake Twitter profile, and what happened when we created that is these people were just lumped into one People application. So you can see there, some people that we started following on Twitter mixed in with Facebook friends. So that's the whole unified application that we're gearing towards here. Very interesting. You can see down in the bottom right-hand corner, if it's not too blurry, you can see that it shows what we're connected to. We're connected to Microsoft. We're connected to Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. So we also connected to Gmail for email. It pulled our Gmail and Google+ contacts into this People app as well. So it may be kind of hard to show, okay, was this person a Facebook friend? Was he a Google+ person? Or was he a Twitter person? It's going to be kind of hard to tell that, but at least we have some caching information there that the web was established that they may have been friends. So very interesting in itself. I did include the communication app artifacts. As you can see, there's the communication app web cache and cookies. Of course, it all comes down to that iNet cache and iNet cookies folder. There is an iNet history folder, but it doesn't seem to really be logging much. It's nothing. It really didn't really get it to populate much information, but there is cache and cookies for communication apps, so we're able to pull a plethora of information from there, or the potential to pull a plethora of information from there. We also have user contacts that you can pull from the communication apps. Now, hang with me here, and I don't know if this is going to be true for the final release version of Windows 8, but within the communication apps, each contact that I showed you in that screenshot earlier has what we call, as you can see at the end of this long string of text here, the gobbledygook here. There is an EDB, #, to the fourth power, .log. So when user contact is dumped into this People application, there's a .log file that's created that will tie a specific user tile and a specific user to a contact to a picture, basically. So it knows where to feed from. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to do some further research on is how is Windows knowing to pull that information from Twitter? That's stuff that we'll have to dig a little bit deeper on as these final release versions are coming out to see exactly how these user contacts are interacting. At this point, I know where it's located and know that that's sort of a .log file. You can see that there's a user tile associated with contact, and I don't really have a hands-on demo to show you here, but you can see there that long string of text. If you were to follow that, it goes back to the user's Windows Live email address. So that's part of that text string. you're looking at the app current version, a DB store, and user tile. So all those user tiles are numbered numerically. We can tie a user tile back to that specific number and then match it to that log file that I showed you in the previous slide. So interesting part about that is we can match Twitter and Facebook postings to a specific tile. So if a suspect is saying, I don't know that person, or I'm not friends with that person, but within the communication app there's artifacts that are cached in there that say otherwise. Or there's a person we were able to pull this from another person's PC and they deleted it within their online Twitter account, but this is cached on the PC itself, we may be able to tie that to a specific user tile. So it is kind of complicated in a sense, but we do have that luxury to be able to associate a tile with a contact and specific postings back to a certain contact. It's hard to determine where it came from at this point. So with that being said, I wanted to mention a little bit more about the Windows Registry. There are some significant changes in there that we see. However, if you were to dig a little deep into Windows 8 and look under the hood, you'll notice that the traditional registry files are still present. That's a good sign for us. The SAM system, software and security files are still there. They're still intact. They look exactly like they did, from back in the Windows XP, Windows 2000 days. The same artifacts are being put there. There are still Anti-User.dat files for each user that's generated. So Windows is pretty much doing the same thing registry-wise under the hood. However, there are some new stuff that's located in there. Now, one of the three things that we were able to see right off the bat is there's some new registry files in Windows 8. One of them is the early launch Anti-Malware, the ELAM. One of the things about that they're looking at is this is kind of a new coining of what we knew as previously as Windows Defender from virus, anti-malware client, and a lot of that information is going to be logged in that early launch anti-malware registry key. I don't know at this point. This is almost like a placeholder for probably later versions of Windows, maybe even server versions of Windows. There's just not a lot going on in that ELAM file right now to say a whole lot about it. We also have a BBI, which is a browser-based interface. Now this BBI you'll see used more later on in later versions as the Metro internet browser, at least IE10, what we know it as now, continues to evolve. So they're setting aside a registry key for that browser-based interface to log information in the future. We also have a SETTINGS.DAT. Now this is a kind of a reiteration of some older Windows legacy technology that we see, but that is more of a user profile registry key. As I see in, there's a lot of research being done in Windows 8. I believe John Barbara is doing some stuff on Windows 8 registry as we speak. I didn't really dive that deep into it, but he's starting to put out some stuff on Windows 8 registry himself. So stay tuned. A lot of people are going to dissect this and really do a lot of stuff with this. For the sake of this presentation, you could almost do a whole presentation on Windows 8 registry artifacts in itself because there's a lot of specific keys. I'm just going to touch on a few of the ones that stick out initially. One of the things that I noticed in the Anti-User.dat file was one of the legacy keys that we saw in previous versions was typed URLs, which showed us in Internet Explorer where a person was typing URLs to go to. Now, in addition to this new Windows 8, you also see a typed URLs time that's showing up. So this is basically a Linux, Unix-based time that can easily be, decoded to, any type of time conversion utility. For you folks that have used decode before, you can paste that in as a Windows DOS time and do the conversion. It'll convert that to a coordinated universal time for you. So it's the keys are in there. They're plain text, very easy to convert. You could even do an FTK imager if you know what you're doing, know your way around. You can make this time versions very, very easily. So just a new key, kind of an added bonus for us digital forensic examiners to verify the time of the typed URLs with this new registry key. So I thought that was a good thing. Some new software artifacts that we added, that we see added, was the Metro apps installed on the system. You can see that the applications there, we can look into software and see what Metro apps were being installed. We didn't really dive into deep to uninstalling Metro apps to see if those artifacts were to go around. That may be something that we can play around with when we get to the message board discussions to see if anyone has done that. They also have user account installed Metro apps, which is based upon the security identifier, which is one of the old Windows legacy things. So we can look at the SID number and see who installed what Metro app, and that could help us determine what user was behind the keyboard when this certain artifact was cached within that specific immersive application. Some new SAM artifacts that are around. We also have a internet username, which is kind of unique in itself. Now, remember earlier in the presentation I talked a little bit about how Microsoft is using their login accounts. You can either use your Microsoft account to log in, or you can create a local machine password. Now, those are being stored in the same manner. They're hashing those passwords, and it's sort of like a hash and cache kind of thing. If you're using the Microsoft password, it will cache that password and hash it and keep it on the local system. But there is an internet username that's being generated in that SAM artifact. There's also a user tile that's being generated in the SAM artifact. Don't know if that's going to stick around. It looks like it will in later versions, but there is a user tile. So like earlier versions, you can associate a picture to a user account, or you're doing the same thing in Windows 8. Windows 8 has a lot of get used to the word tile because that's what it's becoming. The user's tile can be tied back to a specific user based upon this registry key, so you can see what user has what user tile. So some of the other unique artifacts that's worthy of talking about. There's 2 swap files in Windows 8. We also have the pagefile.sys, which is a legacy page file with memory sharing. For you folks who really don't know a lot about swap files, a swap file is literally just a virtual memory on the PC. You'll see a lot of data being dumped into the pagefile.sys. Now, for some of us older users, you remember a swapfile.sys in earlier versions of Windows. Well, they're bringing that back, and I don't know what reason they're bringing that back at this point, other than the fact that there's going to be a lot of data sharing between RAM and the actual swap files itself because of this immersive experience. You're going to have a lot of applications running at one time. So we're really going to be taxing on this page file and swap file.sys, and there's going to be a lot of data there. So if we were, you're going to see the data in there. There's also an ISO automap, which basically, whenever you're dealing with ISO files, you don't have to use a third-party utility like ISO Buster or something like that to kind of dissect an ISO. For us folks, who use a lot of ISO that we download from the net. Also, that I talked about earlier in the presentation, would be good to consider about a resilient file system. Now, when Windows released in October, they plan on, with Server 2013, of including this as a non-bootable partition for the server operating system. Now, this would be interesting because this is different from NTFS. How different from NTFS is because under wraps very, very well. So, when this comes out, it's going to be interesting to see how this is constructed. Is it going to be significantly different from NTFS, or is it not? There's some white papers that Microsoft has published to give a little hint of what is there. There's also some artifacts in Windows 8 that kind of show maybe what the resilient file system is. Using a resilient file system for two major reasons. One of the things is file history. And, there's data that show up file was accessed, how it was accessed, and where. I think this presentation was not on its own. A lot of artifacts to be there. Also, there is a storage pool that's being included in, which is kind of a resilient storage area. Looking at more, we knew previously as RAID. Any file system is going to be set up from the fact that it's kind of in layman's terms, it's kind of a very unique RAID. Not getting into the specifics of it, but the resilient storage areas kind of gives redundancy to the storage that we have on a specific PC. It utilizes a lot of different methodologies that we can store data, such as cloud data and stuff like that. It pulls it into one and makes it very resilient, preserved, how the data is accessed. It's really a lot, very involved. If you have anything on it, feel free to ask questions or even make some comments on it, because I'm kind of a newbie when it comes to the system. Personally, I like to see what other people have to think about it. And, to me, that's kind of continued. With that being said, before I turn it back over to Jamie, you can, copy this down. You can shoot me an email at any time, call, anything that I can do to help. Of course, there's our website on there. Feel free to get a hold of. I'll be glad to answer your questions or to share. Of course, just contact me. So that pretty much does it. I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie now, and we'll just go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh. Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir. I can.
You can. Okay, that's fantastic. Just for people listening, we, as always, ran into some audio issues at the start of this, but I'm glad I'm still online. Okay, Josh, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. I know you've agreed to join us in the forums for half an hour or so to answer any questions which people might have. So, again, my sincere thanks to you for your time. Thank you, Josh.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if you're listening to this presentation at the scheduled time and you do want to ask Josh any questions or discuss what you've heard today, please head over to the forums now at forensicfocus.com, choose the webinars forum from the forum list, and there should be a thread for this particular presentation. Of course, if you're listening to the archived version at a later date, Josh probably won't still be around, not in real time at least, but you can still go to the same forum and join in the conversation there. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. My thanks again to Josh, but also to you for joining us. I hope you found it worthwhile, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.